Welcome to DLA Dialogues from Factory to Foxhole, the podcast where we dive into the heart of DLA's mission and mindset. I'm your host, Jake Boyer. Today we've got part 2 of our conversation with Navy Rear Admiral George Bresnihan, Commander of DLA Energy. Sir, thanks for continuing the conversation.
Great to be here.
So in part 1, we talked through DLA Energy's relationship with Transcom and some of the real-world applications of your role in supporting the warfighter through the lens of large-scale conflicts. Today, I want to narrow the lens a little bit and talk about DLA Energy's current priorities and modernization efforts in the face of contested logistics. But first, let's take a step back for those who may have missed part 1. At a high level, what does DLA Energy do for the Joint Force?
So the core mission of DLA Energy is really the management, acquisition, storage of bulk fuel. We call it Class 3B. That's our core mission. That's what everybody knows that we do. And that's our big focus.
Okay. So, as you know, this podcast is supposed to be centered around contested logistics, so I've got to ask, what does that mean for DLA Energy specifically?
Great question. Contested logistics, I feel like we deal with that every single day. And so I've always thought about contested logistics more of logistics in a contested environment. And I feel like the environment's always contested. It could be, something economical that's affecting a refinery. It could be a law or an environmental law that's affecting a refinery, and we have to figure out how to deal with where we're going to get fuel from, where we're going to move it to. It could be a pump that's broken. It could be a pipeline that's out. And so we deal with this day in and day out, and we just happen to be postured and have the professionals that allow us to deal with that with, I'm not going to say with no problem, but we typically attack a problem, and before I know it, it's solved.
That's always nice to have, to be ahead of the next challenge and ready for the next challenge.
Yeah.
When we talk about bulk fuel as DLA Energy's no-fail mission, how does the math change when operations are stressed and assumptions are stressed as well?
Yeah, so when that math changes, first and foremost, we consider everything a no-fail mission. And so it's all hands on deck. When the math changes or assumptions are stressed or we run into contested logistics, what we do on the energy team is we just figure out, and it may sound oversimplified, but we figure out how to get it done. But when I say we figure out how to get it done, what I mean is that we bring all of our capabilities to bear. So we're looking at one of the authorities that we have is that I can buy fuel from anywhere on the planet. There's some exceptions. There's some countries I can't buy from, of course. But when we run into problems, one of the solutions could be is I go to a partner or ally and use the AXA agreement, the acquisition cross-service agreement to buy fuel. I also have the authority to buy what we call a cargo off the water. So think a tanker floating around with fuel on it. We call up one of our suppliers and say, hey, do you have anything available? And we've done that. We've done that where, hey, something has come up, we've used more fuel or we've expended more fuel than we thought, and we've run into where we weren't going to get a delivery, and we buy some fuel off the water. And so there's a lot of ways we can get a pipeline push. So I'll give you an example. If you remember about a year or so ago, maybe a little bit more, there was a tanker that was in a collision in Europe. All of the fuel on that ship was DLA Energy fuel. And so we couldn't take that delivery. And it was about 10 million gallons of fuel. We got with our UK partners, and because we couldn't get that fuel, we got a pipeline push from them, filled our tanks, and then once we cleared that fuel to come off the ship, we were able to work a payback to them. So that's another creative way that we were able to solve a problem where we knew we needed fuel in those tanks at that time.
I guess that's one of the advantages of working in a capability, I won't say commodity, that is really similar to what everybody else is using, is when things really gets troublesome, it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you another example. When supply chains are stressed. The four bulk products main products we buy are Jet A1. We can buy JP8, which is an additized version of Jet A1, mil spec think. JP5, which is refined to a higher flash point, and then we buy diesel marine F76. And so amongst the jet fuels, we had an issue with the supply chain in Djibouti, where we normally issue JP8. We'll get it out of the tanks, and we'll issue JP8. Well, there was an issue with the JP8, so we were able to move some JP5, got approval from the Air Force, and they can fly off JP5 as well. So we're always looking at options, but because it's a no-fail mission, we're going to stress everything in our capability to get to yes.
So shifting gears a little bit, why does modernization matter to winning what may be the next fight?
Oh, I mean, modernization matters across a lot of areas, but it matters because you have to keep up with your adversaries. But in our case, we want to keep up with industry. Modernization makes you more efficient. Modernization ensures that the product, especially in the energy space, is going to be up to spec when it comes out of the tank, right? Modernization allows us to maybe clean tanks and inspect tanks faster than normal. And the nice thing about the class 3 or fuel is that really it's not specifically made for defense. As you said, fuel is fuel. And so there's certain industry standards we have to keep up with that allow us to operate. And also, as long as we're staying modern, we're on par with our commercial partners, so it becomes much more interchangeable, if you will, and interoperability becomes a big part when you stay modern.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the expansion of the Fuel Afloat program. Can you explain what this program is? Like, what problem are you trying to solve, and what does the expansion look like?
So, I would tell you that we weren't really trying to solve a problem at first when this popped up, but when we were removing the fuel from the Red Hill DFSP, one of the solutions was to put fuel afloat. So we needed to find a way to take the amount of fuel we had in Red Hill and put it and keep it in theater. And one of the ways we did it was we put some fuel afloat. And what came out of that was a realization that this may be a good thing. It gave us a certain amount of flexibility. So now we had a large amount of fuel afloat that we could move. Not only move in theater, but move to other theaters. And so while that fuel, in this particular case, sits in that theater, and it's going to be there mostly, if we need to move it, when you think global supply chain, we have the ability to do that. We didn't have that ability before. So while there's always positives to having a fixed fuel site with a lot of storage, we learned that there's some positives to having that fuel afloat. It gives us great flexibility.
Sort of the opposite of an Iron Mountain for fuel, in a way.
That's right. That's right. And so then where do you go from there? Well, what it made us think about is where else would we want to do this? And there's some trade-offs. I mean, it's more expensive than a fixed site, but it gives you great resilience and great flexibility. And, you can move a tanker of fuel anywhere on the planet. And so, again, that's that resilience that we're always looking for.
I want to spend a minute on utilities privatization because it connects directly to your modernization efforts. Can you walk us through what you're doing there kind of at a high level?
So really with utilities privatization, we've grown a cadre of personnel that are experts in this space. We're not necessarily the only persons that do it, but we do it probably best. I'm probably a little biased, but bottom line is what we're seeing, and I'll use my service as an example. The Navy has come to us and they say, hey, we want to privatize a lot of our installation, think distribution utilities, plants. And so when energy comes, however energy comes to a base to power a base, it comes through a distribution plant. over the years, many of the services have done the maintenance and repairs on that themselves. But as plants become more modern, as services divest themselves of maybe those skill sets, things become more expensive. You get microgrids that come into play that are new technologies. It becomes more expensive to maintain. And as we start to look at bases as places that are, that's where your forces are generated, you need to have that resilience. And so, like I said, the Navy comes to us and says, we'd like to privatize this particular plant. And so what that means is that between DLA Energy, the Navy, and a third party, private party, is going to come in, and we're going to spend about 24 to 36 months working through this deal where the Navy says, we'd like all of these upgrades, modernization. This is, these are the terms and conditions. The private company says, okay, got it. We'll do all of this. This is what it's going to cost. DLA does the acquisition of that deal. And what comes out the back end is a modern, resilient power plant that will allow, that under many circumstances will allow that base to continue to run. So especially here in the States where we've got a renewed importance on the Northcom AOR, and so the DLA Energy has become the experts in this utilities privatization. So that's kind of it in a nutshell in how we do that. There's an inventory taken by both the private company and the service. They come to terms on what that looks like, and then the company takes it over. And then we'll sign a 50-year contract. And so we have again the resilience. We have a long-term deal in place that ensures that the base is going to have that power. We did that with the Army in Texas, and there was a big snowstorm a few years ago at this particular base. And when everybody else lost power, the base never lost power.
Wow.
Yeah, the base never lost power. So that's very important. So if anything were to come, if anything were to happen here in the U.S., you want to make sure, or if we're projecting from the U.S., we can't afford to not have that base up and running.
So many times we're staging for military installations, so having the power, the lights on where we're staging is critical.
Imagine where we have, aircraft that have long legs and can launch from the U.S. We just can't afford to have, power plants or distribution that don't have resilience. And then when it gets even more complicated when you start talking about cyber risk. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so if you have to cut everything off from a power source, but retain, you need the ability to keep power going. You want to have that modern, up-to-date distribution.
So one last thing that you brought up in the first episode, and it's a really cool thing that I want to touch on before we sign off, is DLA Energy's support to the Artemis II mission to, take mankind back to the moon. What do you want to say about that? Like, what did DLA Energy do?
Well, I mean, DLA Energy just it did what we always do, right? We had a requirement for that particular type of fuel, and the team just made sure that we had it at the right place at the right time, and so, but it gets a little deeper than that because it's got to be, it's so critical that it's on spec, and that. It can't be right before that it goes off spec. It's on spec. It's in the right place at the right time, and a lot of that fuel is not fuel that's that's made by a lot of folks. So having that fuel ready, it was just a cool thing that we got to be a part of, and we do a lot of little cool things like that.
Yeah. You and I are both from the space shuttle generation, so seeing stuff like this really blows. We don't have our hair anymore, but it blows our hair back.
That's right. That's right.
Well, it's time for the long-promised rapid-fire round as we wrap up. First up, what's something interesting you've read, watched, or listened to lately?
Oh well, I tell everybody, landman is required watching for, for energy folks. We do the downstream mission, but learning that upstream mission, I joke, but we joke about that. One of the things interesting that I really enjoyed was the book we all read in DLA. At least a lot of the leaders read there, Monster Transformation. I found that very insightful. Another book I'm reading now or getting into is On Character by Joe McChrystal. I had an opportunity to work for him, great leader, and so getting into that book right now is kind of what I'm doing.
Time to add that one to my list. Second question: what's your superpower? And you can't say learning.
No, I think people. I mean, I think I think my superpower is really people. And when I say people, I mean I think the ability to connect with people no matter where they are in the organization or in my life. And so for me, from the most junior employee at DLA Energy, to obviously the most senior folks there and folks at DLA, I think one of the things that I'm able to do is really connect with people at wherever we are in the organization and have a conversation. And on top of that, it's probably one of the things I enjoy the most. So I tell people all the time, if you're in the DLA headquarters building, you'll see me walking. I go to the cafeteria almost every single day. The food is great, but mainly the reason it gets me away from my desk, but also I get to connect with folks. So it gives me that little bit of break that I can go down there for a few minutes, and inevitably I'm going to run into somebody that wants to talk about something, whether it be sports, whether it be energy, whether it be golf, whether it be whatever.
Okay, finally, what's your kryptonite?
I would say my kryptonite is probably my two daughters are probably my kryptonite. And when I use that kryptonite, it's what makes me weak. And so I've got three kids. I got my son. He's great. But really, the two girls, I'm definitely a girl dad. And so my kryptonite is it's hard for me to say no to them on just about anything, especially the 14-year-old. So I'm weak when it comes to that. So that's probably my kryptonite.
I think we share that kryptonite, sir. I can't disagree. Well, thank you so much for joining us. You're the first MSC commander we've had on the podcast, so hopefully we'll get more of these, but this has been insightful, a lot of fun. We've really enjoyed it. So thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity, and I love the opportunity to be able to just share a little bit about DLA Energy, but most importantly in that is really, and hopefully I emphasized it, is the people, right? Because DLA Energy doesn't happen without the experts and the great people that have worked there for years before I got there, and they'll be the years after I'm gone. The people are the strength of DLA Energy, probably DLA as well. But hopefully that came out, and just thanks for the opportunity to brag about them and the mission that they execute.
Great to have you here to do it, sir. Thanks. For DLA Dialogues, I'm Jake Boyer. Until next time, remember that learning is a superpower. Use it wisely.